Hi, good day guys, Karen Duncan here, and in today's video I want to teach you how to use the choose function inside of Microsoft Excel. Now the choose function is not a very well-known function in Excel. Nonetheless, as we'll demonstrate in this video, it can do some very powerful and cool stuff that you'd probably be very interested in. So what the choose function does is it can choose a value or an action based on a number that you give it. That number is called your index number. Let's type up the syntax of the choose function so that you get familiar with the arguments. As you can see, the first argument that it will ask you for is the index number. Then it asks you for a value 1, a value 2, and it continues value 3, 4, and so on. These values are the options that you're giving the choose function. And the index number that you select is the option that it'll return. So if you selected an index number of 1, it'll return value 1 or option 1. If you select an index number of 2, it'll return value 2, that's option 2, and so on. Let's use a basic example here to demonstrate how the choose function works. Let's use the choose function to choose one of the values for these revenue figures for these different locations. So what I'm going to do is I'll ignore the index number. I'll put a comma and I'll select value 1 as this first figure, value 2 as the second, and so on. Let's include a closing parentheses. And let's say I selected the index number as 3. What do you think the choose function would return? Well, it should return the East revenue figure because that's the third value or option within our arguments. So if we place 3 and we click enter, as you can see, it returns the East figure. So let's take a look at a more powerful example that's really going to show us what the choose function can do. So as I mentioned earlier, these are revenue figures for 4 different locations for the year 2020. What I want to do is generate a projection of revenue in the year 2021. I want to project the revenue based on 3 different scenarios. And these scenarios are referred to as case 1 here, which is excellent, case 2, which is satisfactory, and case 3, which is unsatisfactory. Depending on the scenario, I have different percentage increases. So what I want to do is use the choose function to demonstrate to me numerically the different sales figures that I expect based on the scenario that I encounter. I also have a chart here which is tied to these figures, so we're also going to get a visual depiction of the different sales we expect based on the scenario. To do that, I'll type equal choose, and once again I'm going to ignore the index number, so I'll include a comma, and my value 1 is going to be my revenue figure multiplied by the first scenario percentage increase. Value 2 will be the revenue figure multiplied by the second percentage increase for the second scenario, and so on. We can include a closing parentheses. So if I come back here and I include my index number as 1, I should get the first expected projection based on scenario 1. Let's say I selected 2, I'll get the second projection. So I can drag this all the way to the side here and get the 4 different projections. So that's pretty cool. One limitation here though, which you may have noticed, is for me to select each of these different options, I have to go inside of the choose function and I have to continually change the index number. That's a bit time consuming, and what I want to do is develop a more dynamic way to choose the option. So what I'll do instead is I'll use the match function to dynamically choose the option number for the index number. Now, if you want to learn how to use the match function, I'll include a video in the description below which will explain that to you. So what I'm going to do firstly, let's just click enter here. And what we'll do is we'll create a data validation list or a drop-down list here with each of these scenarios, And we'll feed that into the match function so that we can find the item number that we want. So follow along with me. What I'll do is go to the Data tab. I'll go to the Data Tools group, select this one for data validation, select this drop down and click List, and in my source, I'll select these items here. Let's click OK, and as you can see, now we have the 3 items for the 3 scenarios. Let's just select one. So we'll go back into our choose function, and here for the index number, let's delete this number, and instead let's type match. Our lookup value will be the item selected in our drop-down list. Let's include a comma. Our lookup array will be these range of items, and our match type will be exact. What you should do is lock this reference. You can press F4 to do that. And you can also lock this reference as well, because we don't want these references to move as we drag this function to these other values here. So we can click enter. Let's apply this to these other values. And now as we switch to different items in the drop-down list, we should get the different calculations based on the scenario. As you can see, the calculations are changing, and you'll also notice some very slight movements in my chart here, which denotes the change in revenue figures based on the scenario. So that's a pretty powerful way that you can use the choose function, nesting it with the match function to return the option that you want. A final way that we can use the choose function, which I'll demonstrate, is to perform different calculations using different functions. So what I want to do here is I want to be able to sum the 2020 figures. I also want to be able to get the average of the 2020 figures. I want to be able to get the highest figure, and I want to be able to get the lowest figure. I also want to be able to do the same thing for the 2021 figures. So what I'll do is I'll type total here. I'll type average next. I'll type max, and I'll type min. Let's create another data validation drop-down list. So we'll go to the Data tab. We'll go to this data validation button. Let's select list, and for our source, we're going to select these items. Let's hit OK, and now we have these different options to determine the calculation that we want. So what I'll do now is type equal choose. And once again, for the index number, we'll use the match function. Our lookup value is going to be the item in our drop-down list. This is going to determine the calculation that we want to perform. Let's lock this by pressing F4. Let's include a comma. And our lookup array is going to be these items here. So these are my options. We lock this as well. And our match type will be 0 for exact. Closing parentheses. Let's include a comma. So my value 1 is going to be to sum the 4 values in the 4 different locations because I want the total. My value 2 is going to be to get the average, so I'll use the average function. My value 3 is to get the largest revenue figure, so I'll use the max function. Let's highlight those values. And to get the lowest revenue figure, I'll use the min function. So let's input those values as well. Let's include a closing parentheses, and it's telling me yes to include the additional parentheses. Click yes. And now what we can do is we can drag this to the side. So we already got the 2020 calculations to work here. If you switch this, you'll see the figures change. The only thing is, if you double click, you'll see that this is not the range we want for 2021. So all we need to do here is go back into these different functions, sum, average, and so forth. And we'll highlight this range here, and we'll select the 2021 figures instead. Let's click enter, and there we go. So if we select total, we get the totals for 2020 and 21. Average gives us the average. Max will give us the max. And let's just do a test here. Let's see. So our max in 2020, 139,156. I'm sure you can notice that this is indeed the max figure. And our max in 2021, 146,713.80. So it looks like everything is working well. So these are two examples of pretty powerful ways in which you can use the choose function. So I hope this video provided you with value. If it did, then give it a thumbs up. Also, if you want to continue getting content from the channel, don't forget to click subscribe and turn on your post notifications. Finally, let me know in the comments what other videos you'd like to see me perform next. It can be a video in Microsoft Excel or in some other Microsoft application. So once again, I want to thank you very much for dropping by, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.